Hey you guys, welcome back to the channel. So last week we went over the drape for this pattern, and this week, as promised, we are going to tackle the actual pattern to make it happen. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so, share and comment down below. Hit me up on Instagram so that we can stay connected. Here we go. Let's go ahead and just hop right into it. All the little lines that we made, we are going to pinpoint on the fabric and dictate what it is. So mark your center back, your center front, your neckline, your side seam, your waist, and anything else that needs to be notated, just so that you have those reference points. Use your beveled ruler to mark any straight line that you need, as far as like your center back, your center front, and your side seam. Once you are done with that, using that beveled ruler again, you are going to use one of the interior lines just so that you can make a perpendicular line on any intersecting seams. And what I mean by that is right here where the waistline is, you can mark a 1/2 inch marking all the way across. In order for you to do that, you have to match that side seam up to one of the lines on the ruler in order to make that line perpendicular. So it needs to be at a 90-degree angle when you are crossing the seam, just so that you don't end up with a point. Now, once you're done with that, use your hip ruler or whatever curve ruler you have in order to mark your curve lines. This ruler is the hip ruler, and with it I was able to mark and smooth out the waistline, and then we will do the armhole opening. So just like before, you can use your beveled ruler to create that 90-degree corner, which is where the line is intersecting, or I guess you should say crossing over from one pattern piece to another. Just like if you were to create the center back pattern and split this whole pattern into two and create a center back and a center front, then you would definitely have to make sure that that side seam is smooth all the way across. These lines are not perfectly smooth on the fabric, but when we transfer it onto paper with the tracing wheel, that's when we will balance and smooth out, just so that everything is nice and smooth. Using a piece of paper, go ahead and lay that down underneath the fabric. Once you lay it down, make sure that your fabric is nice and smooth. Try not to stretch it because your grain will go off grain. I went ahead and added some weights. These are just regular washers that I bought at the local hardware store, just to keep it laid down nice and smooth and just keeping it in place. They're very simple, and I don't know, I find them useful. But using your tracing wheel, wherever you made a straight line, you can just mark the top and bottom of that seam. So the top and bottom of the center back, top and bottom of the side seam, the center front, and the neckline. And then from there, you would have to trace all the way across the curvature of the waistline, the arm opening, as well as the curvature in the back. Add your annotations. Make sure you add what it is so that later on when you come across it, you'll know what it is. And with the perforations that you made with the tracing wheel, you're now going to mark again, this time on paper. So just like we did before, go ahead and make your straight lines with your beveled ruler. And then from there, you're going to make those hash marks just so that you know that the intersecting seams are perpendicular to where they need to be, so that you don't have any points when you go to smooth out and balance your pattern.
Dream up a world of pirates, climb the highest tree, fall down. Mama, I'm fine, don't worry. Go back out, you see, sail home, sweet home. where the ships must go to get all cleaned up and put away. Call it a day.
Once you have smoothed out all of your lines with your hip ruler, curve ruler, all the special rulers that you use, go ahead and go back to your center front line. Using one of the lines from the beveled ruler, line it up so that it is parallel to your center front. And then with that, you're going to anchor it so that you make a perpendicular neckline to the center front so that it lines up to where the actual shoulder would be. The reason that we do that is so that the center front, once we open up this pattern, it doesn't cave in like a V. You'll actually have a straight line going straight across, which is what it would be. And we're also gonna cut on fold, so that neckline will actually be on fold when we cut.
Sweet home, where the saucers go.
Now that you have created your drape and you've also created your draft, we are now going to take the draft and create the actual pattern. So where we're going to need your grain line along with your seam allowance. So I decided to split this pattern into two pieces to make a center front and a center back. So go ahead and grab a piece of paper. We're going to create the center front first. Fold it in half, depending on the size. As long as this full center front is able to fit on it, you are good to go. If not, make sure you have your tape nearby so that you can cut and paste whatever pieces of paper you have to make it work. I went ahead and I've already written the center front, write down the crease of that line, just so that, you know, I can be aware of what's what. Even though the center front and the side seam are two different sizes and one's longer than the other, but I just like to be thorough. Go ahead and match up your crease with the center front, and just like before, wherever there is a straight line, you can use your tracing wheel to mark the top and bottom of that line, and then wherever there's a curve, you have to go ahead and trace it completely. Now the center front is going to be your grain line, so there's no need to add a grain line to it. But you can definitely go ahead and mark it anyway. Once you have all of your annotations stating the size, the cut amount, the name of the pattern, all your seams are placed. For this one, I actually ended up just doing a half a seam allowance for the waist, the side seam, and the armhole opening. We are going to cut this just once because it is going to be cut on fold at the neckline. It'll be a full pattern. It'll just be folded in half. So the same material will end up being the lining of it as well.
Call it a day. Call it a day. Call it a day. Call it a day.
Because I've already folded the paper in half, I already have where my center front is going to be. So when I cut it, I'm going to cut it folded on that center front line, and then when I open it back up, I will have a full center front, the right side along with the left, and that will give me my full pattern versus a half of a pattern.
Steady on the hand, fly home, sweet.
So the next part here would be to cover the center back pattern. If you have any scraps left, tape it together and make your, make a piece of paper pattern that is big enough so that it could fit. Otherwise, just cut out another piece and then save those scraps for a later time, because you never know if you're just going to need like a small portion just to make a seam line or, seam allowance or whatnot. So definitely don't throw those scraps away. Keep them set aside. Save a tree. Anyway, nonetheless, just like we did with the center front, we're going to do the same with the center back. Using your tracing wheel, Whenever you are going around a curve, definitely make sure to follow it all the way with your tracing wheel. As far as the straight seams, like your side seam and the center back marking, just mark the top and the bottom of it, and then from there you can use your beveled ruler in order for you to make a straight line. Once you have that, go ahead and remove your draft. You can fold it, put it away, put it in a safe place. I like to use the clear sheets to store everything in, or like 9 by 12 Ziploc bags, and I'll create like a pattern cover. That way I know what it is. But that draft will go in the same place with the drape along with the pattern. That way all three items are all together. And if ever I need to modify that pattern and make it into something different, I know that they're all together and I know where I need to go in order for me to make those modifications. Now, the center back will be your grain line. So you can go ahead and mark your side seam, mark your center back, and with your bevel ruler, which is 2 inches wide, you're gonna mark it again within the pattern. And then from that additional marking, there you can make your actual grain line. So the marking that you make within the pattern is technically based on your center back, so that fabric, no matter what, it will be on grain because it's following that center back seam. Once you're done with that, mark your waist, the actual marking that is supposed to be where the fabric is falling for the center back. Mark your armhole opening, the neckline, everything you need to do. Once you're done, you can add your seam allowance, which originally I said it was a 1/2 inch for the center front, so we're gonna make it the same for the center back. This is where we balance. We always make sure that we don't have any points where the seams are meeting up. Everything needs to be nice and smooth. So now that I know it's nice and smooth, go ahead and, add your seam allowance and cut. Once you're done with those patterns, the next thing to do would be to cut out the pattern for the skirt along with the straps for the shoulders. And then you are pretty much done, ready to cut out your fabric and start sewing. But before we get to sewing the fabric, let's make that skirt pattern. So my waist is 30 inches, my hips are 40 inches wide. Hips 40, waist is 30. My waist to ankle is 32 inches plus the hem, just ignore that, which is 0.5 inches, a 1/2 inch. So in order for me to dictate how long I was going to make my fabric, I went ahead and multiplied. So the 40 times the 2.5 inches gave me 100, plus the 3 inches gives me 103. But without adding the 3-inch for the seam allowance, technically your center front, the skirt front would be 50 inches. So this whole measurement here would be 50. The skirt back would be 50. But you have the seam allowance here and here. So your seam allowance is going to be a 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch on the left, 1/2 inch on the right, and that gives you 51. Okay? The skirt length again will be 32 inches from my waist to floor, plus the 0.5, which is the hem. For the skirt back, we're going to do the same thing. Since we know that it needs to match the same width here as the front, otherwise you'll end up having uneven gathers if your center back is smaller than your front. So with that,
being said, you'll have 25 here and 25 here. But because, again, you have to have seam allowance, otherwise you're taking away from the fabric and the actual size that it's supposed to be. You have a half an inch here, half an inch. The 25 converts to 26. So it's 26 inches on both sides, and your length here will still be 32.5. Besides the fabric for the actual skirt, the only other thing you would need are the shoulder straps. Now, I ended up adding 2 straps just because I wanted to try something different, which I found some cute little straps at Joann's Fabric that I wanted to switch out and add on instead of the ones that are in the picture. I'll show the process next week in the next video, along with sewing it, showing how I put all of this together. But my shoulder straps from the front to the back where it's supposed to crisscross was 9 inches. So I went ahead and I cut out a 20-inch strap. Make sure to cut it on bias by 1.5 inches. Your seam allowance is going to be 3/8 of an inch, so 0.37. With that being said, when you turn it back inside out, it should give you a good enough strong strap. That way you can attach it. Otherwise, you can go to the local store, local fabric store, and just find yourself some beautiful straps and attach it to your garment in order to embellish it and make it cute. And that is all for today, folks. If you have any questions, definitely drop them down below. Comment, like, subscribe, turn on the notification, and I will see you Thursday for Thursday tips.
And this wraps it up for today. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, like, share, and comment down below if you have any questions. I will see you next time. We'll be sewing this and putting it together, so do stay tuned.